My faith in anime has officially been restored, and that's thanks to the very first episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Get ready to get slimed, my friends, because there's a brand new anime on the block, and it's got a ridiculous title and a crazy premise. It's That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. This is an anime series that I was not initially going to watch this season, as to me, it felt just a little too strange and esoteric. It's the type of anime that I tend to avoid, if only for how incredibly strange it is, especially because I'm not a big fan of shows that have ridiculous and long titles. But I have been absolutely inundated with all sorts of messages and emails from people telling me to check this show out. And you know what? Thank you guys so much for begging me to check out this show. This might be one of the most unique anime experiences that I have ever had, and it might be one of the most intriguing first episodes of anything that I have ever seen before. So, what is this series all about? So, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is the story of Satoru Mikami, a 37-year-old virgin living in Japan. A guy who seems like he's honestly pretty content with everything in his life. He just sort of goes with the flow and does his very own thing. And it opens up with him in the middle of the city getting ready to meet his friends for lunch when suddenly they are attacked by a crazy dude with a knife. Satoru decides to save his friends by jumping in the way, ends up getting stabbed, and he dies. What I especially love about the first couple minutes of this episode is how you can really tell that this series is having a lot of fun with its premise and its characters, and it has a fantastic sense of humor. While Satoru is there bleeding out in the streets while his friends are crying over his body, he's not trying to really focus and say his final words. He's actually more concerned with what's actually on his hard drive on his computer, begging his friend to actually get rid of it and destroy it. This is funny and incredibly creepy all at the same time. Whatever is on there, I can only imagine, but I guess he redeemed himself by saving his friends, but then suddenly he dies. But this entire series is all about reincarnation, and we get to learn that he does get reincarnated. Not as another human, not as a plant, and not as an animal, but actually as a little blob of slime. And not only has he been reincarnated, but apparently he's in a completely different magical world. Yes, he's essentially in a fantasy setting at this point. And now he's a little blob. He can't see anything, he can't talk, he basically just sort of rolls around, sticks to surfaces, and eats anything that he can find. There's nothing else for him to do, and this brand new bleak existence is one of the funniest things about this episode. And the way that they actually take this little blob and personify it is really interesting, because occasionally he has these little lines on his face which look like eyes, and sometimes when he gets really shocked by something, you get to see that eyes and even a mouth actually form on him. But at the same time, he's just kind of like, well, I'm a slime now, and there's not really much for me to do in this world. That is until, as he makes his way through the cave and starts eating everything around him, he realizes that he's not alone. He's actually in this cave with this giant sealed dragon, this creature which has been sealed away over 300 years ago by a great warrior. And this dragon comes across as almost like a very villainous character at first, when you suddenly realize that it's actually just a lonely monster that's looking for a friend. He even refers to this creature as a tsundere. This giant dragon goes by the name of Verudora, and he's a super powerful storm dragon, one of only 4 that actually exist in the world. And he gives a proposal to the young slime, which is to stay there and be his friend, but not to be scared. If he gets scared, he's probably going to end up killing him. And that's when you realize, what the fuck am I watching? What is the ridiculousness of this series, of this giant, goofy, and expressive dragon talking to this little blob of shit? I'm not sure why it works, but it just absolutely works. A lot of this is owed to the fact that the entire series has an incredibly unique style to it. There is some imagery in this series that is absolutely mind-blowing in how trippy that it actually is. The actual scene where Satoru actually starts to transform and reincarnate into this, like, slimy blob creature has got to be some of the most visually stunning things that I've actually seen from many anime franchise. And they even managed to change up the style, utilizing a lot of CG and even some realistic looking imagery, which makes this one of the most unique looking animes that I've actually ever seen. But the way that the episode ends with Satoru as this slime actually getting ready to team up with this dragon and form something of a partnership is really strange. I had no idea where the series was actually going to go from here. That is until they give us the intro at the very end of the episode. So going into this series blind, I honestly didn't quite know what to expect. I thought this was going to be sort of like a generic fantasy comedy anime, and in some senses it does sort of carry that spirit. But the intro that they tease at the very end of the episode shows me a much larger world, a world that I didn't expect to see, a world filled with unique and interesting characters, and it appears that eventually Satoru is going to get some form of a human body back. They show that off actually in the intro, and what's really interesting is that this body is way more feminine than his original appearance. It's almost genderless in some ways, but he can still utilize these slime abilities to transform and contort his body in a number of interesting ways. It looks like he's going to be joined with a lot of other interesting and flashy characters going on crazy adventures in this brand new fantasy setting. What's really unique is that they firmly established that people who reincarnate can actually come to this place from other worlds, and they actually sort of tease that a little bit at the very beginning of the episode. In fact, that might be one of the most striking things about this episode, is the very first scene is almost completely unrelated to anything else from the rest of the episode. They actually end up showing us an animated scene of the firebombing of Japan during World War II, which is very stark and very, very disturbing, and something that a lot of other anime series have covered in a much better way. But they actually show this young little Japanese girl who seems to lose her family and ends up getting killed in a giant torrent of fire, and I'm guessing that she is also going to be reincarnated and sent to this world. In fact, I have a theory that there's this one girl that they actually show throughout the entire episode, the one who sealed away Verudora, and the one who appears in the intro. This might actually be the same exact girl, and this is going to be really important, as Satoru is probably going to want to try and meet someone from Japan who is reincarnated here, just to have someone he can potentially relate to, because at the moment, he's a little slimy blob, and the only best friend he has is a giant tsundere dragon. So what's the rundown on the very first episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime? This is awesome. This is one of the most unique anime that I've ever seen, and the very first episode completely sold me on its premise, and it was so simple. The first half was just Satoru dying, and the last half of the episode was just him adapting to his brand new slime body, but actually watching him, like, come to terms with that was honestly kind of fun. He was completely okay with the fact that he was a slime, and they have a lot of fun with watching him go through this cave and utilize his new ability, getting trapped underwater. There's a great scene where he gets trapped underneath this little body of water and he has no way of escaping until he decides to suddenly transform into Kirby from the Nintendo game, suck up a bunch of water, and propel himself skidding across the watery surface. It's moments like this that show me that this show is going to get really inventive, and the introduction of the character of Verudora I thought was really awesome. He's already just an amazingly emotive character, and what I love is how they sort of build him up to be like this big, evil, dragon-like character. I have a feeling he's kind of building himself up a little too much. I think he's going to be more of a jokey character who comes across as really horrifying, but actually he's kind of a big softie. And the way that they show him in this episode is great, because sometimes he looks absolutely terrifying, and other times I just want to laugh my ass off at some of his expressions. And his interactions with watching him talk to this like little slime blob in a cave made me realize that this weird premise, as crazy as it actually is, just absolutely works. I love it, and I absolutely loved going into this episode blind, not actually knowing what was going to happen, knowing nothing about the characters. It truly amplified my excitement of the show. As far as production value goes, this is a really nice looking show as well. There's a bunch of different visual styles that are used throughout the course of the entire episode. A lot of that is through this weird interface that Satoru seems to be communicating with throughout the entire episode. It almost seems like something you would see in a video game. It communicates to him and it explains all of his special abilities, how they can be utilized, and how we can use them to interact with this brand new fantasy world. And that combined with some of the trippy imagery here, honestly just makes this visually striking. Even the normal stuff at the beginning of the episode of just the characters walking around in the city, everything looked really great. Satoru, as a human, was really funny. Look at this guy's ridiculous grin and try not to laugh. Everything about the show is really unique and funny, and I did a little bit of research to learn a little bit more about this show, and like a lot of popular anime nowadays, it's based on a light novel series, very much like, say, Juni Tyson or even Sword Art Online. And I don't read light novels, so that means this entire experience is going to be completely unique and exciting and fresh, and I'm very excited for this one right here. It might even be one of my most hyped shows for 2018 right now, and I didn't even think it was going to be that. I was more excited for stuff like, say, Goblin Slayer or even JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which I absolutely loved those, but I kind of had an idea of what I was going to be getting from them. From this show right here, it completely surprised me with everything that it was doing. It was hilarious, it's unique, and I cannot wait to see where the show is actually going to be headed. I highly recommend this show. The first episode completely sucked me in. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. You guys need to check out this show. Thank you all for introducing me to this, all my commenters and the people who messaged me about this one. If any of you guys did watch this episode, tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Did you like this one? Did you not like this one? What do you hope to see from this brand new franchise? Let's get a discussion going about That Time I Got Reincarnated as a slime. Guess what? You guys are going to get 2 reviews in this video right here. Yes, I know it's a special occasion. I actually just got done watching That Time I Reincarnated as a Slime. I did the record, and I didn't have time to do my edit. And the very next day, the next episode came out, so I just went ahead and decided to watch it so I could combine it with this review right here. So let's go ahead and talk about episode 2, and my feelings are still the same as the first episode. This show is incredibly inventive and a lot of fun. What I especially loved about this episode is that we finally got to move out into this magical world, which is filled with all sorts of fantastical beings, whether it be adventurers, mages, guilds, or even some goofy goblins. There's all types of RPG tropes in this show, and something that I never even mentioned in my review of the first episode is the music. I love the music in the show, and a lot of the times that's because during some scenes where they're explaining something or just watching Satoru the slime sort of make his way around a cave and fight against bad guys, they use this old school 8-bit music, kind of like something you would hear in an old Nintendo game, and it totally goes perfect with the overall theme of this show, which seems to be an homage to RPGs in general, but still doing things a little different than other shows that are actually in that genre. But this entire episode right here was really great, and like I said, it sort of plays out like an RPG. In fact, my sentiment in the first episode, I even mentioned that Satoru the Slime reminds me a lot of Kirby, and that's completely solidified in this episode, as he actually has the ability to consume his enemies and actually take their abilities away from them. But before we get to that, we have to talk about the fact that he has formed a very strong relationship with Veldora the Storm Dragon. It was implied in the first episode that eventually they were going to team up together, but first he would have to free him, and so far, he doesn't quite know how to do that until he comes up with the crazy plan that he's quite literally going to swallow him whole, barrier and all, and in a sense he'll actually be able to take him out of this space, but he'll still be contained within his slime body. Veldora seems pretty okay with this, to the point where he decides to form a family with Satoru the Slime, and they decide to give each other some brand new names. It's going to be like a family name, a family crest, and they're going to go by the name of Tempest. And Veldora actually decides to give Satoru a brand new name. He will now formally be known as Rimuru Tempest, the name of the slime. And what's hilarious is the plan actually works. He actually manages to swallow him whole, and you don't see Veldora for the rest of the episode. I'm slowly awaiting that moment where that big badass dragon is going to return, and I can't wait to see how elated he's actually going to be to finally be free from this cave. But the rest of the episode actually follows Rimuru as he goes around the cave, fighting against monsters, basically upgrading all of his abilities and leveling up like he's a character in a video game. He fights against giant snakes and centipedes and bats, and it's really fun watching his character progress from being just a little slime to swinging around like Spider-Man to using these really kick-ass water blades which can cut through just about anything. Basically, by the time he's ready to leave the cave, he's kind of a badass, and as he's actually exiting this cave, he finds this giant door, and these 3 adventurers come in and manage to sneak right past him. I don't know if these characters are going to be important or not, but they do have distinctive designs, so they almost certainly are going to be. Now, swallowing Veldora has actually had some pretty big repercussions. Apparently, he was sort of like a guardian in this massive forest that he existed in, and his very aura basically scared away all of these monsters. Now that Veldora's presence can't be felt, there are all of these other creatures which are just dominating the woods. In particular, these giant wolves, which of course are known as dire wolves. They're just really giant monster wolves, that's all there is, but they're killing everything in sight, in particular a village filled with all of these goofy goblin characters. And what I love about these guys is they're unlike any other orc or goblin that you've actually seen from any other anime series. And it's really kind of funny to actually see that because one other anime this season is called Goblin Slayer, and it's a completely different show. But what's really great about these goblin characters is they've actually seeked out Rimuru. They find him because they can actually sense his presence, and they realize that he is some sort of big, super-powered being, and they desperately need his help in order to take down all of these wolves from killing their entire village, which these wolves are really strong. It apparently takes like 10 goblins just to bring down one. This old goblin, who is the elder of this village, even had a son who fell prey to these wolves, so in many ways he has a personal vendetta against these creatures. But of course, Rimuru is not going to do everything for free. He doesn't necessarily want any compensation, and they don't fully get into really what it is in this episode, but he is going to need their help if he is going to become stronger and maybe even gain a brand new form, something which is continuously teased in the intro, and I can't wait to see how that's actually all going to play out. But it looks like Rimuru has become the leader of the village of goblins. And so what's the rundown on this episode? Of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime? Another fantastic and super hilarious episode of the series. I'm glad that we're finally getting out of the cave and moving into this brand new world, which slowly but surely they're actually starting to build up. And it's unlike any other fantasy world that I've actually seen before, especially the way that they actually portray the goblin characters. They're really goofy, and honestly, they're just a bunch of wimps. They come across as really fun characters, and I can't wait to see more of them and how Rimuru is actually going to lead them. But Rimuru's development was easily one of the best things about this episode. Like I said, the fun thing of watching him actually sort of upgrade himself as it actually goes on was really clever. His ability Predator, which allows him to pretty much absorb the special ability of any other creature that he manages to swallow, is honestly pretty freaking awesome. It makes me believe that eventually he's going to find some sort of human body to consume. That's actually what we actually see in the intro. But the fact that it hasn't even happened and we're 2 episodes in and the main character is still just a little sludge ball, that's pretty bold. And I have to say that it still manages to be incredibly entertaining how they can take this character and make him so expressive and, most importantly, very funny. I'm really glad that the series is doing a great job of keeping its humor intact, and I really hope it never really goes down too deep into a specific rabbit hole. I hope it doesn't get too dark and serious and it always manages to have a little bit of fun with itself, because that's the best thing about the show. As I mentioned earlier, I love the music cues. They are perfect for this type of show. As someone who grew up playing old school Nintendo games and the original Final Fantasy games, it just fits so perfectly in the show, and again gives it something that's really unique and sets it apart from some other anime that I've actually seen. That and the fact that, come on, the main character is just a fucking piece of slime. It's also good to know that the production value on the show did not go away. This is a pretty great looking series. Nothing too mind-blowing, mind you, but for the most part, it's pretty clean. And like I said, they can take a little blob character and make him surprisingly expressive, whether it be his eyeballs slowly popping out, or even just the sense that when he gets confused, a question mark grows out of his head. It's visually just really fun to look at. And this was another awesome episode of the series. I cannot wait to see more from this show. It has been a complete and utter surprise for me. I'm giving this episode as well a 5 out of 5. I'd love to hear from all of you if you watched either of these episodes. Tell me what you think about the brand new anime series, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Let's get a discussion going about this brand new show. Make sure to check out my channel for tons of other anime reviews. This has got to be the most jam-packed anime season that I have ever seen. I'm looking at a lot of different shows, so make sure to check out the channel for different playlists. If you are subscribed, make sure to hit that bell notification icon. It'll let you know when all my videos are released. Thank you all for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.